Our top story this hour, judgment in the urgent court interdict to halt private prosecution proceedings of President Cyril Ramaphosa will be handed down in the High Court sitting in Johannesburg this morning. Just last week, a full bench heard argument on why former President Jacob Zuma's attempt to charge his successor is unlawful. Zuma is accusing Ramaphosa of being an accessory after the fact for failing to take action against prosecutor Billy Downer. That's in relation to the alleged leaking of his medical records by Downer to journalist Karen Morn. Let's get you a sense of what we know and what the way forward looks like. Bring in Ziyanda, Ngcobo, our reporter watching the story, live to us in our studios today, and it's been a back and forth for quite some time since before the ANC conference actually last year, Ziyanda. Let's begin by just unpacking just the main thrust of the arguments that were made in court last week.
So basically, this all boils down to whether or not even the basis of this private prosecution stands. So, it couldn't be avoided, the argument that at a prima facie level, that at least according to the laws of President Cyril Ramaphosa, this private prosecution is unlawful by virtue of the fact that the Nolle Prosequi certificates were not issued in relation to President Cyril Ramaphosa. And that was the main argument that his lawyers made. And there was also an issue of jurisdiction and whether or not then the civil court, which is the court that this matter was heard in, has the right, yes, but were the circumstances extreme enough for them to actually halt this private prosecution? You'll remember that in order to have a private prosecution, you need that certificate of non-prosecution from the Director of Public Prosecutions. That's why the NPA and the KZN DPP are also respondents in this matter. Now, there was also a question about personal harm, like which rights exactly of President Cyril Ramaphosa are being infringed if then the private prosecution, which is already on the court roll for this Thursday, does go ahead. And one of the arguments was about personal harm. And Dali Mpofu, who was representing former President Jacob Zuma, was saying, well, the harm will remain there even if this court does not grant this urgent court interdict, because the summons, the argument that President Ramaphosa made, of course, was that the summons that were issued to him on the 15th were to actually achieve a political end, i.e. sway the outcomes of the ANC conference. But also, even the step-aside guidelines will still remain in place long after whether or not then, this issue of the urgent interdict, whether or not this court decides that the interdict should be upheld. So these are some of the issues that came out, and we'll hear then whether the judges believe that President Cyril Ramaphosa on Thursday should be in the dock.
Absolutely. Even if Ramaphosa is granted this interdict, it shouldn't be lost to us that there is still going to be a time where the merits of the case still need to be argued.
Yes, so I mean there's part A and part B. So part B then of this court matter is dealing with then dismissing the summons that were issued by the former president, and also the issue of a cost order. And we'll know that the former president has several court cases where he has to pay personal costs. So there's also an issue of technicality that the former president's lawyers are raising, and they'd raise the issue of the commission of oaths and the signing of the documents. Those are just some technical issues that they've raised in the court papers. But certainly, there's still the merits of the actual case. How is President Cyril Ramaphosa an accessory after the fact when his lawyers are saying, well, the president was not even aware of this alleged crime up until President Cyril former President Jacob Zuma, I should say, wrote to him on the 25th of August 2021. And the president, having taken this matter seriously, according to his lawyers, then responded to Zuma to say, well, actually, I'm referring this matter back to the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, and the Legal Practitioners Council. And so the issue of separation of powers and the ability of the president to intervene in matters when the law enforcement agencies is one of them, the tenets of this. But it will ultimately boil down to those Nolle Prosequi certificates that were issued by Elaine Zungu, the KZN Director of Public Prosecutions, and whether or not they extend to President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Absolutely. We can't help but look at the optics all the time. This is coming at a particular moment. There's incredible political context to be applied to it in some instances. The court, of course, will steer clear of those optics, many might say. They're going to deal with whether or not there are grounds for this interdict. But as we look at this, difficult not to also connect the dots around when this particular application was brought forward. But more than that, it feels like there are, some people might say, more urgent things that the president should be dealing with. like addressing the country's energy crisis.
Addressing the country's energy crisis, and it would have been interesting if the president had decided to get on the plane and go to Davos when the 19th of January is when this matter is set down for. We don't know how the courts, what the judgment today is going to be saying in that matter. But of course, you'll know, those summons came on the 15th of December, literally on the eve of the elective conference. Now, interestingly, one of the arguments that Dalimpofu made was that if we're really dealing about personal harm, why didn't the president urgently, because remember, this is an urgent court interdict, and the issue of urgency, then he was saying, well, why didn't he go to court on the 16th, the 17th, before nominations, if he genuinely believed that there were political ends? Ironically, it's now former President Jacob Zuma who was quoting the Supreme Court of Appeal when they rejected his permanent stay of prosecution, and they said to him, well, actually, the motive becomes irrelevant if there is enough evidence for the court to actually go through or to peruse through. So I found that interesting, and that's really in relation to the arms deal case. Of course, a lot of it is political. Everything is emanating from the arms deal trial, which the former president has maintained is a political conspiracy against him, because then it cascades into him accusing Billy Down of leaking his medical records to News 24 journalist Karen Moore, and now he's saying by extension the president also should have intervened because he's the only person who can, launch a commission of inquiry, which is basically what the former president had requested Ramaphosa to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Several moving parts. Thanks for helping us connect the dots. As always, Ziyanda Ngcobo, our reporter, watching that story as it continues to unfold. Judgment expected today. Catch it first here on Newzroom Afrika. For now, Ziyanda Ngcobo, thanks very much indeed.